Three, two, one. What's happening, guys? This is Logan Robinson from here, the Spirit, presented to you by NoleGameday.com. We're here live on a wonderful, fantastic Wednesday evening, back on our Wednesday evenings with us this week. We have a handful of things to go over this week. We've got a mix of topics tonight. We got some quick hitters, including Florida State's home games, a lot of those being sold out before we even get close to the fall here. We got a recruiting roundup with D-Lou after a big recruiting weekend in Tallahassee. D-Lou is going to give us some names and some things to look out for going on during this summer on the recruiting trail for Mike Norvell and company. And then we got a handful. We got over 10 questions from you guys that we're going to go over, all related to fall camp, a little bit going into the season, but we'll heavily discuss what we're going to be preparing for when we get out there, when D-Lou's out there and the rest of the team at NoleGameday are getting prepped for what should be a really fun fall camp for the Seminoles. And we got some basketball latest from VZ. Sadly, not an NBA champion fan, but you were a good fan and you went to 2 games on the road over there in Dallas and had a good time. But congratulations, Dustin. You are finally a champion. You get to have the floor here and open up the show.
Yeah, I don't really need the floor. It was a lot of fun. A long time coming for the Celtics, and yeah, I mean, I've probably watched thousands of games over the last 16 years, just kind of waiting for that moment. So to see it after what they've built for, basically the last 8 to 10 years was really special. And we'll see if they can keep the run going. But the Mavericks also, I mean, really good series out of them, and I think they're going to be around for years to come.
That's nice of you, VZ.
I just love how Celtics fans, not Dustin, but a lot of Celtics fans have acted like the Celtics have been cursed for the last 18 years since they last won in 2008. Boston's a very spoiled sports city. Like, let's just lay it out bluntly. I think I saw earlier they've made 33 conference championships since 2000 across all 4 sports, which is just absurd. So, I'm glad the Mavericks are in it. It was cool to see Luka and Kyrie in that atmosphere on that platform. It was awesome being at games 3 and 4. A lot of fun. Game 3 is definitely more electric, just more back and forth. I wouldn't even say back and forth game, just a crazy game at the end. Game 4, everyone was kind of nervous that the season was going to end there. And then next thing you know, it's a 40-point blowout. So definitely fun to be there in Dallas. Looking forward to hopefully being back at more games next year.
It was fun to watch. It was definitely fun to watch, and us now being included on practically over there in Dallas. We've got our guy Grant Afseth covering for our Mavericks site, Mavericks Game Day, and then of course VZ as well. Jumping into the NBA scene, we just got super lucky there and started right off the bat to begin the playoffs. But now I got to be watching more NBA. Didn't think that would happen, but here we are, and it's been a fun team to cover so far. And like you said, VZ, bright future for the Mavericks, and then you got the Celtics as well. Let's start jumping into some things. As like I said earlier in the show, we've got 10 or more questions here regarding DJ, wide receiver room questions. We're going to talk tackles, who's starting there, a lot of things, maybe some battles to watch out for. But before we get started, as always, you can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. If you're on YouTube right now, hit that like button. Would definitely appreciate it. Gets it out there to more FSU fans. Make sure you subscribe too so you get notified every time we release a new episode. Gentlemen, start off the week some kind of big news, but maybe not too shocking. It's shocking at first a little bit with how far away this is. But Florida State announced that their home games against UF, Clemson, North Carolina, and newly arrived Cal have all been sold out for Doak Campbell Stadium. I say that it's not too big of a shock, just because there's a good reminder here that Florida State is going to be at a lesser capacity this upcoming season due to the renovations going on. And as we've talked about here plenty and shown you guys some images and the renovations and some looks at it, they're doing a lot of stuff. And like we were at the spring showcase, you look down there and there's no home side right now inside Doak Campbell Stadium, but still, nonetheless, you got a lot of these big games sold out early. It's going to be a jam-packed kind of Doak Campbell Stadium. And we have a question here in just a little bit in our Q&A. How could Doak Campbell Stadium at this capacity affect this upcoming season and such? But still, Florida State versus UF, Clemson, North Carolina, and Cal officially all the way from June into, running into the fall. This is already sold out before we even get to July, gentlemen.
Yeah, you got to swoop up those tickets now because, like you said, the capacity is going to be reduced for this upcoming season. Seems like it's going to be between 55 to 60,000 or so, and some temporary bleachers and stuff coming in on the home side while they're working on those renovations, and still expecting the stuff on the visiting side to basically be completed by the beginning of this 2024 season. So, I mean, it's going to be a lot different from, how Florida State fans have really ever seen it. I mean, there's a lot of changes going on, and yeah, I think it's going to be something different when everyone gets in there on Labor Day night when Florida State takes on Boston College.
And despite the limited capacity, they also have twice as many fans as Miami will have this year. So I'm not too worried about it. It's good to see, Florida State fans really come out and support this team, even with limited capacity. And what should be an interesting Joe Campbell Stadium. It's going to be, really a once in a lifetime experience in that stadium, with it being almost half empty.
Yeah, we've never seen it in our lifetime of any kind of renovation like this happening, except for the Champions Club there in the end zone for us. But still, it's going to have some kind of factor potentially. But, one thing, Mike Norvell, I think he got asked this during spring, just about Joe Campbell Stadium, the renovations, any kind of distraction to the program itself or the players, coaching staff, whatever. And they just say it's day to day, everything we do, nothing that really kind of blocks out. There's nothing really that affects us here. We're just locked in on what we need to do assignments wise. And, we'll go anywhere to play ball. And I think that shows what Florida State's been able to do pretty successfully too, as of late, neutral sites and visiting teams as well. When they're traveling, they go and play, and they seem to be mentally with it. So nothing too much of a shock that whenever Florida State goes out there and Doak, 55, 50,000, whatever it's going to be, should be just fine. Just going to be a little bit of a different experience, I think, for the fans. The fans are going to be thinking more about it than I think the coaches and players will be. So, but yeah, already sold out ahead of season there for those games. Shouldn't be too long till probably all of those home games will be wrapped up at this point, probably before the end of the week right now. D-Lou, let's jump into a recruiting roundup here, because there's a lot of stuff that happened this last weekend. We always see these we're getting the photo shoots and everywhere, all over the place and whatnot. But I know that there's different recruiting times too coming up as well that we probably need to keep an eye out for. But Florida State's been very busy all over the place, I feel like, in camps and doing some offers here and there. I think they just offered, 2028 quarterback? Did I get that right? Golly.
2 of them, actually.
That's actually nuts. Yeah, so maybe just jump us into where we're at on the timeline on the recruiting side, and we can discuss.
Yeah, I would say the biggest stuff coming out of this past weekend is just a couple of days after visiting Florida State earlier today. Actually, 5-star defensive lineman Justice Terry backed off of his commitment to USC, where he had been pledged to since March. So, I mean, just a couple days after he's in Tallahassee for his official visit, decides to reopen things. Seems like right now, probably the biggest threat to pick him up is actually Georgia, who he was previously committed to for over a year. But, I mean, regardless, this is one of Florida State's top targets in the defensive line. I think they're, right there in this battle with the Bulldogs. Yeah, he's expected to be at Alabama this weekend, so we'll see if that visit kind of changes anything and the Crimson Tide are able to enter the picture. But, I mean, Florida State battling for Justice Terry. And then another one, 4-star wide receiver Malik Clark, one of the top players in South Carolina. He was also in Tallahassee this past weekend, released his top 5 earlier today. Florida State made the cut alongside North Carolina State, South Carolina, and Auburn. And I mean, this is probably one of the top names to know on Florida State's wide receiver board at the moment. They've had a couple guys come in at that position for official visits throughout the month. Khalik Lockett being one of those guys, a 5-star prospect who was also in Tallahassee over the weekend. And then you're going to have 3 more guys who we'll get into this list of everyone that's going to be in Tallahassee for this massive weekend, the 21 to 23rd here in a second. But I mean, Florida State really targeting that wide receiver position to continue to add talent. And just another thing, I mean, maybe one more potential addition to the 2024 roster prior to the season. Florida State had a really intriguing prospect on campus for his official visit beginning on Monday. Previously had came by and worked out at a camp, and this is actually a former basketball player in the overtime elite. His name is Jazare Jackson, 6'11", about 320 pound, projected to be an offensive lineman at the college football level. So, I mean, this is a guy who Florida State is exploring the possibility of adding. You've also got Florida, Georgia, and Mississippi State as the other programs involved at this time. I believe that visit to Georgia is upcoming at the moment. He might be at Mississippi State right now. But, I mean, a guy with a ton of size, you don't really see someone with that kind of body type on the football field often. And, you know, he was a pretty productive basketball player. But, I mean, not someone with that type of body who could necessarily, that translates over to the NBA. And he actually aged out of the overtime elite because it's got a 20-year-old age gap. So I think he recently turned 20 and wouldn't be eligible to play another season. So now he's going to transition to the gridiron, and you're already seeing a lot of high-profile Power 4 teams interested in him.
Damn. That's a big, 6'9", 300.
Overtime elite actually lists him at 6'11", so you have to guess he's probably in the middle of that 6'9" to 6'11" range.
Jeez, that's a big boy right there, VZ. That's a big boy at center. But
why can't he just continue playing that in college basketball?
Come on over, help out Leonard.
Leonard Hamilton needs a center.
Maybe they can mix something together here. Wouldn't that be nice? But yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one that really intrigues me out of the few that you were talking about was Justice Terry, just because of Florida State and what they need in that defensive line and having their own root of talent that they can develop there. I feel like that's something that Florida State should try as much as they can and take advantage of. But whenever you've got some other powerhouses after them, it's not the easiest to do. But Florida State really desperately, in my opinion, needs to get back and doing what they've been able to do. Outside of the transfer portal, they need to get into those trenches. And, you know, really what you're looking at right now that you've been able to grow in your own talent or tenure in college so far since high school, you're looking at Joshua Farmer. And, you know, yeah, that has turned into who's going to be a big time player this upcoming season for Florida State's defense on the defensive line. But, you know, you want to have a couple more of those guys. And yeah, you got some youngsters, and you got a guy like KJ Sampson in there. But, you know, getting these big boys, these 5 stars, these guys that can come in and be an early rotational player, if not, you know, potentially start for you, that would be ideal for Florida State, what they need to do on the recruiting trail moving forward.
Yeah, and the good thing for Florida State is they are involved in that battle, and then they're also going to have a couple of other blue chip players at the position in Tallahassee this weekend for their official visits. I mean, we can kind of go through that list. 19 recruits expected at this time. 4-star quarterback commit Tramel Jones Jr., who's been pledged to Florida State for over a year at this point. He's actually participating at the Elite 11 right now. So, I mean, we should have some stuff to be able to talk about as far as that and with his visit next week on the show. We've also got 4-star running back Byron Lewis, one of FSU's, well, I mean, probably arguably their top target at running back at this time. A trio of wide receivers, Vernell Brown, Dalen McCutcheon, and CJ Wiley. Also bringing in a tight end, Hollis Davidson, who is someone that FSU is really focused on right now. You know, last week we talked about Hiaikee Williams shutting down his recruitment, deciding to stick with Georgia. He won't be officially visiting FSU, so that makes Davidson that much more important. Then you've also got 5 offensive linemen, including a trio of 5 stars. 5-star Solomon Thomas, 5-star Ty Haywood, and 5-star Josh Petty. Also 4-star Lamont Rogers and 4-star Peyton Joseph expecting in Tallahassee. So Alex Atkins going to have a lot to work with this weekend as Florida State tries to put together a really impressive offensive line haul. Then you move over to the defensive side of the ball. Pair of defensive ends, Javian Hilson, who's been committed to Florida State since flipping from Alabama in January. He was actually FSU's most recent commit on the recruiting trail, you know, hoping to change that in the near future. And you've also got the hometown kid, Jalen Wiggins, who is currently pledged to Florida, but, you know, FSU's been chipping away there and hoping they can sell him to keep him home in the 850. and you go into the interior defensive line, you're going to have 4-star Myron Charles, and also 4-star Kevin Wins. I mean, those are the two guys I was talking about there. Florida State competing there along with trying to land Justice Terry in that interior. You go to linebacker, 4-star Tavian Wallace, who's going to commit right around there at the beginning of July, and also 4-star linebacker Gavin Nix, who Florida State competing with Miami right there in that recruitment, and also going to bring some guys in the defensive backfield where you've got 4-star defensive back Gregory Thomas, top target for the Seminoles, and someone who they're potentially the leader for, I would say, fighting with Clemson at this moment to finish out that recruitment. And then also 4-star defensive back Shamar Arnu, recent addition to the board after coming through a camp earlier this month.
Mm-hmm.
So it's stacked.
Yeah, absolutely stacked all around with rich talent. Speaking of rich talent, I want to go watch Tremel Jones here a little bit because he's just kind of naturally gifted here, and I think it's someone that Mike Norvell is going to do his hardest to try to hold on to. I think he at the Elite 11, he told someone there and said go Noles and everything, but blah blah blah. You got to wait till pen hits paper, but there's a lot to like about Tremel Jones. Have you been able to see him in person of any kind at camp? And what were your thoughts on him, just seeing him up close?
Yeah, actually, I got a chance to watch him last year at the Seminole Showcase whenever they held that in Doak Campbell Stadium, something they do every summer at the end of July, inviting top targets from the current class and also future classes. So Tremel was there, and also Luke Kromenhoek was out there throwing. He was going into his senior year at the time. And then you also had the legacy quarterback who's in the 2026 class. His name's escaping me at the moment. But, I mean, all three of those guys were out there really putting on a show at the time. And, I think with Tremel, it's really the zip that he can put on the ball, also an extremely accurate quarterback, maybe a little bit undersized at this level. I think he's grown some this offseason, though, and put on some really good weight as well. And
looks like in his base.
Yeah, and, I mean, you look at what he's done. Just absolutely dominated the 7-on-7 circuit this offseason. I mean, really, I think he could be a riser as he goes into the senior season. And, you think about he's obviously got a really talented receiver to throw to at the high school level in 5-star Jamie French, a guy who was considering FSU at one point. I think the biggest thing is just kind of keeping him in the boat. He's already been committed for a year. Obviously, the Gators are turning up the heat a little bit and trying to flip this recruitment around. And I think Florida State, they had this evaluation a long time ago, similar to what they're able to do with Luke, really picked him up when he was underrated at the time. And I think it's important to keep him locked down now as he's picking up so much attention going into his final year at the high school level.
Yeah, I agree. That's something Florida State did a good job there, and let's see if it continues to pan out for Florida State to stick on to Tremel Jones's commitment. I mean, Florida State, what we're going to see, you have DJ here this upcoming season, but just to see this QB room start to expand with its own talent there. And of course, yes, you have the transfer portal, and we'll see who all kind of sticks around there, but there's some really good natural talent you have in that quarterback room under quarterbacks coach Tony Tokars. Let's jump into some of this Q&A, gentlemen, unless there's any other recruiting stuff that you want to throw in here to us, D. Lou.
Not right now. I mean, there's a couple of things. It's going to get more important after this upcoming weekend, and they have all these guys come through Tallahassee. We're at the point where 2025 prospects are starting to set their announcement dates. There's going to be a couple here at the beginning of July, mid-July. So, yeah, we can definitely get into those next week.
Sounds good to me. All right, guys. So we went on social media and asked you for some questions regarding fall camp as we're getting pretty close, D-Lou. I know you were talking about it in our NoleGameday Discord that, it's early and it's even earlier because of Florida State's starting the season in week 0. And then college football season got pushed up into obviously August, a little bit more earlier as well. Getting close. So we grabbed a lot of questions from you guys, over 10, regarding all kinds of things in here. So also, too, if you have any questions in the chat or you want some topics regarding fall camp, throw it in here and we'll jump into those as much as possible. But we've got a handful to go through, so let's get started. This is a question from Twitter. From this is to be hard to say, and this is always the difficult part about this. Definitely when you are coming from Twitter or Discord, y'all specifically, because I can't actually say a real name. Faroukwa Wahab. I mean, I don't know what that means, nor I'm really worried about what it actually means now. But hopefully, I didn't get clipped and I'm getting canceled. But this is a question regarding DJU, asking, has DJ developed into the offense yet? Has he developed into the offense? And Dustin, you and I were discussing, of course, VZ as well, but, just being able to go to the practice and see him out there, you saw progress throughout the spring camp with him. You probably saw that more in the ladder side of it, where you started seeing him kind of start pick up some things and understand his wide receivers and get that chemistry built. And also too, just understand Mike Norvell's offense and what he's expecting from him from week to week. And we saw progression there. But, I think from the most recent interview that Mike Norvell did with Greg McElroy said, there's still some things that we've got to work on this fall camp for DJ to get him developed into this offense. But the question is, has he developed into the offense yet? Still probably got a good little ways to go.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of answered the question for me. Really, You started to see that progress during the second half of spring practice, because, I mean, Florida State, they were just going through so much installation, with a new starting quarterback, and obviously DJU coming in from Oregon State, transitioning to his third offense in 3 years. So, there are some similar concepts, but it's really a new language for him and something that he really had to work to learn hard very early on during his tenure at Florida State. Seems like he did a really good job of that. You notice throughout spring practice of his ability just to kind of spread the ball around. We talk so much about him throwing that deep ball, which, it's really impressive when he's able to connect on those. But I mean, also just getting to the point where he's throwing those intermediate passes and hitting the running back out of the backfield and checking down to the tight end. That starts to make you feel comfortable that he's figuring out things with the playbook. And it was an up and down spring game. And I think, that's just how it is with the way the playmakers performed during that game as well. It wasn't a pretty showing from any side, but, you saw some good, you saw some bad. Obviously, DJ just has so much experience, and you have to imagine that he's continued to build chemistry with those guys since the conclusion of spring practice. And I'm excited to see what it looks like whenever the preseason rolls around, because you consistently hear Mike Norvell as he's kind of going on this interview tour leading up to the 2024 season. He's praising DJ a lot in these interviews. And Florida State, they haven't officially named a starting quarterback, but in these interviews, I mean, DJ is the name that you're hearing right now, and that says something to me.
Mm-hmm. Yep. There's a topic on here real quick that we definitely can't just run by and miss. This is from our guy Stan here saying, Dustin looks like he needs a haircut. If this stream gets 50 likes, he should get a mohawk.
It's
actually that for 50 likes.
It's quite funny. I don't know if I told you guys, but I decided just not to get a haircut until the Celtics won the championship. So
we can tell this week. I can tell more.
Now that they concluded it on Monday, I'm actually now eligible to get a haircut. Today is 70 days since my last haircut. It's been 10 weeks today since my last one.
Ooh.
The crazy thing is, I was going to do the same thing with the Mavericks, and they went down 0-2 in the finals. I'm like, I can't do it, and got a haircut the day before game 3.
Yeah, not worth it then. Ooh, but yeah. What would have to be enough likes, D-Lou, to get you a mohawk? Like,
I don't know that I have enough hair for a mohawk, even though I haven't got a haircut in 7 days. I mean,
it would look weird.
I can't rock it.
No, it would look a little different. So
maybe 5,000 likes.
5,000
likes. Jeez,
man.
You asked how many. You said how much would it be worth it?
Oh, man, we're not. Dang, I thought, do it for the content. Come on, man. I mean, Austin went on here and broke a ukulele.
Yeah.
And now look who's at quarterback.
That's a good point.
Look who's at quarterback at Florida State. It's ukulele, QB1. All right, next question here is coming from our Twitter and Discord. Big Guard University and No Sweat DFS are asking about the wide receiver room. Which wide receivers do we need to see a good fall camp from? And who's going to step up in the wide receiver room alongside Benson? So I think everybody right now, at least in the fan base, feels like, Malik Benson, we talked highly about him, of course, this spring, projected him to be wide receiver 1. But now it is solidified, I think, across a fan base that now someone behind Benson needs to take that next step. And who is it going to be? So really the question is generated, about this fall camp around the wide receiver room and what we should be expecting going into the season. We know who's going to take who's going to actually take on that role of what you lost with Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson, who were absolute playmakers for Florida State and their tenures.
As far as the who needs to perform in fall camp part of the question, it's freaking everybody. I mean, there's been no one in this room that has consistently been able to separate themselves from the rest of the pack, except for Malik Benson. I mean, someone who we talked about, so much throughout the spring, just making plays. But outside of that, it's a lot of potential, a lot of talent, but not necessarily a lot of game production or consistency. We thought going back a year ago, Kentron Poitier would be that guy, but then he was limited by injuries for basically the entirety of the 2023 season. And, frankly, didn't live up to expectations during spring practice. And we saw that with at least one massive drop in the spring showcase where it would have led to a really big play at the time. And, outside of that, you got a ton of guys who have been there for a while. Hiaikee Douglas, Darian Williamson, Deuce. Then you go to some younger guys. And what's really unfortunate is you lost Dustin Hill for the season. And you also had Vandravius Jacobs decide to transfer to South Carolina. But, you've got former 5-star prospect Hiaikee Williams. Hopefully the light can turn on. You started to see it some during the spring. And he's actually getting a little national buzz leading up to the season. We'll see if he's able to take advantage and utilize some of that hype during the preseason. Can't forget about Jaylen Brown either. Didn't see him out there for the spring showcase, but he was someone that was making big plays throughout spring practice. So I think really it's going to be a room by committee. But if I'm thinking that there's going to be someone else that steps up and kind of has a consistent presence in that offense outside of Malik Benson, I'd probably go with Hiaikee Douglas.
Mm-hmm. We've talked before how this is probably going to be a receiver room by committee. And, like you said at the beginning of that segment, it's one of those where just everybody in the room kind of has to step up outside of Malik Benson. You need to see more consistency overall from everybody in that room, not just Hiaikee Douglas or Poitier or Hiaikee Williams or whoever you want to name. That whole room has to get a lot better this fall camp, even if this is likely going to be a run-heavy offense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the offense is going to look a good bit different, and I think it's going to affect this wide receiver room probably the most just because of what you have at quarterback with the arm that DJ brings. But I agree with you, Dustin. I think Hiaikee is someone that I am expecting a lot of this upcoming season because of that factor with DJ being at quarterback and what they're going to try to do with the deep ball. Malik Benson, too, going downfield. I think it's going to open up a lot of room for him to excel. But, yeah, there's some veterans that we talk about, like Darian, and then, of course, Kentron that we want to see, almost like it's like just knocking at the door and just can't explode into what we have seen in camps so many times from those two, especially Kentron. Just staying healthy is big. He's wearing number 1 this season, so maybe that changes the game there, and we see some big time elevated production from him. But he's got that ability, and just having those hands are really special there in the red zone for him. But there you have to find wide receiver talent and game that can help them because you lose Keon and you lose Johnny, and they were such a pivotal factor in saving drives. If you go back to the last couple of seasons, Johnny saved so many drives and games, and Keon Coleman, just being a superstar athlete, would make some crazy grabs for Jordan Travis. So yeah, there's another question on here regarding that wide receiver room, from Devin on X asking, will Hiaikee put it all together to help elevate the wide receiver room? This guy's put in a lot of work this offseason and going into the spring, whole type of body change, D-Lou. That was a kid who, whenever we were watching all the guys walk in, and I only had that one practice, like, dang, Hiaikee Williams looks a whole lot different, man. He's built in a whole different way. Coach Dorans put him into a lab and got to work with him immediately after the season. And, I think him just being more conditioned, and we saw the speed in the middle of the season last year when he got some playing time. He has that, but, they're expecting, I think, a lot out of him this upcoming season, and I would not be shocked if he's one of their starters at some point in 2024, if not really early.
He made a big.
It's a big fall camp. I'll just say it's just a big fall camp for a guy like Hiaikee Williams.
And he took a big step forward with his body during the strength and conditioning program in the winter. Like you were saying, Logan, added some good weight, and it was basically all muscle. I mean, really filled out at this point. You think back to a season ago. I mean, we've talked about it before, but he was struggling during some of those tour of duty workouts, and he got into spring practice, and as the practice would progress, or if it was the second practice in 3 days or whatever, there would be some times where you're seeing some hands on hips, and you can tell that he's a little bit tired out there, adjusting to how things are going at the college level. But he's had a year to get into it. Seems like he's committed himself to the process. And yeah, I mean, you can see it right here. Some real developments in the weight room. And I would say those positive strides carried onto the field during spring practice. Still, like I said about the rest of the wide receivers, you want him to be more consistent, but you're starting to see him show up more day by day. And that's really the totality of his game, getting involved as a blocker at certain points. Obviously, his talent as a receiver. I think there are still some times where maybe the ball bounces off his hand a little bit, or he doesn't quite run the route that the play is designed for. But he's getting closer and closer each day. And I think with his potential and talent, if it starts to come together a little bit more during the preseason, there might not be a justification to keep him off the field over one of the older players on the roster.
At the same time, you have to remember he's a true freshman last year. It's rare that a true freshman comes into a major program and makes an impact receiver. It just doesn't happen very often. Even when
with what you had last year too.
Yeah, with what you had, and then even as high of a caliber as Hiaikee was coming out of high school, there's an adjustment period for every player coming out of high school. Very rarely do you see true freshmen come on and make an impact at any position, much less wide receiver.
And even though he was a 5-star, he was always a guy that needed to develop more at the college level. It wasn't like he was coming in as a college-ready, polished receiver. I think he was a 5-star based on what he can do as an athlete and some of those physical things that he has that, you just can't teach or someone can't possess no matter what. I mean, you either have it or you don't. He's got some of those things. The route running, I wouldn't necessarily say the effort, but the stamina, the ability to work as a blocker, as a receiver, instead of just a playmaker all the time. Those were some of the things that he's needed to learn, and I think he's getting there.
This next question is from the Best 2013, our guy on Discord, asking which cornerback / tight end, so those two position groups, do we need to see a good fall camp from? So a good variety there offensively and defensively, but I think it's a good question mark just of what you have at cornerback, what you lost last season, and going into this upcoming year. Mike Norvell was just talking with Greg McElroy on his last interview over there on his show, talking about, what they were sending into the NFL and what they lost there in defensive back room and what they were going to have to expect from a guy like Azrae Thomas, what you brought in the Alabama transfer portal, literally, as Florida State has built a pretty strong connection there with Earl Little Jr. going into that nickel position. You're losing Greedy Vance there, but and then you jump over to tight end, and which has also seen a big shakeup there in that room overall too, with a handful of guys like Marqueston Douglas and Jaheim Bell no longer being in that room going into this upcoming season. Shakes up a lot about that offense too and what Mike Norvell likes to do. So, the first one starting off with cornerback here, who needs to have a strong fall camp?
I'll say Earl Little Jr., just because, the main reason Greedy Vance decided to essentially depart from Florida State was kind of the uncertainty of that role in the nickel spot, competing with Earl Little Jr., making that transfer in from Alabama. Not a ton of tape, as far as game tape, but he's shown his potential in practice. This was a guy who was rated one of the top prospects in his respective class coming out of high school, has a history of success working with Coach Surtain, and we saw some of that during the spring. Made some really impressive plays at times, was able to close on balls for interceptions, and just consistently making himself in having a chance to make the play. every time he was basically out there. And, we heard some good stuff from Coach Fuller, Coach Sertan, Coach Norvell about his steps forward. And now you really want to see him go out there and seize it during the preseason.
I agree with that. Especially with Greedy Vance going out, or Little Junior, just that guy to step in that secondary, or in that slot position. You also have to remember Jerry Jones is in the NFL now, so it's not like you're seeing some of the rotation that you saw last year. It's really or Little on the inside, and maybe some Kevin Knowles again, which no one wants. So it's definitely going to be on Earl Little Jr. to lock down that position.
Mm-hmm. This next question is from Greg Knoll fan on X, asking, floor is obviously raised.
We skipped the tight ends.
Oh, yeah, we did. Oof, sorry.
Well, here's a
Morlock.
Here's a quick
Morlock,
answer.
That's all we got.
Here's a quick answer. Anybody in that room needs to step up because it's not a great room. Morlock wasn't great last year. And then you have Landon Thomas and a bunch of unproven guys. It's really unproven rooms. Just anybody.
It's crazy how forgettable they are. Logan just went ahead and bypassed it there. But
I'm being a regular person here. Unless it was like stitched in my brain. I've already gone from last year. That was one of the groups we were most excited for. Now it's pushed all the way back again. Like we're back in 2022. Oopsies.
I've got to go with Kyle Morlock just because he's the dude in that room right now. And I mean, last year he was exposed for his weakness as a blocker at times. And I mean, as we've said, Florida State without Jaheim, without Marquise and Douglas, without Preston Daniel, I mean, he's one of 4 players in that rotation that are back with the team. And I think he really needs to assert himself. And I didn't necessarily see that all the time during the spring. And I mean, you would think with how the rest of that room looks, he would be a clear standout. And I want to see that when July rolls around, because physically he's got the potential to do it. He's just really got to go out there and have that mentality, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. I know, like the passing game for the tight ends this upcoming season, I just don't see them as a threat now. I mean, we're going to see what Mike Norvell and the staff put together there, but I just don't see them as a threat really in the playbook now. And I'm just interested to see what Mike Norvell is going to do there, because you look at some of them, what was it, Jackson West, that put on some really good size there in the spring. You could definitely see the size difference there, but I don't expect him to be a passing guy that's going to be a threat to a defense. But I don't know. Just interested to see what they're going to end up doing there. And you got a youngster with Landon Thomas, that you recruited and were able to flip back from Georgia. But, he's just not going to be able to put out any kind of output, I don't think, as much as you would like, as you get in year 2 from him. But he's got a year to develop, and we're just not going to see him put out there into the college level immediately. He's a guy that you're going to have to, get with Coach Storms and spend a year, and we're going to see. But he's just got natural ability, though, as being your biggest threat as a pass catcher.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest problem. It's like, who is the true threat in that room outside of Morlock? I mean, it's hard to name someone. And Florida State, they've run a lot of these 2 tight end sets and had success over the last couple of years. And you think about how they were able to sprinkle Marquise and Douglas into that counter run attack, where they had some really productive games, especially in that 2022 stretch. I mean, it was insane how effective the counter was at a certain period of time. I don't know that Florida State has a guy like that. I mean, Jackson West is obviously a very good blocker, but I still think he's maybe a step down from where Douglas was at. We'll see if he does take that step forward. And he's also obviously battled a lot of injuries during his time at Florida State. And Landon Thomas, like you said, I mean, just a youngster, but I think they're going to have to put him out there because he's got the talent and he's the face of that position moving forward. And then with Brian Courtney and also Jarrell Powers, I mean, you don't really know. I mean, that's really the biggest question mark for me on offense going into the preseason at the moment, with the wide receivers as a close second.
Maybe this question, it's regarding, who do we need to see a good fall camp from? Yeah, we need to see it from Morlock, but really, I'd like to see it from Jarrell. I would like to see a strong, bump in his improvement. He's got the size. He arrived with some big size, but if he can get down the playbook, I think that was one of his biggest things, just getting that down and also being consistent in his pass catching. Jarrell can really help push up that room and build that bridge for Landon Thomas and give him a little bit more time to develop throughout this upcoming year. But yeah, we're probably going to see some Landon Thomas potentially a decent amount in 2024, just because Florida State's going to look for that passing attack in that room itself for this offense for DJ. Next question here is from Greg Knoll, fan, asking, floor is obviously raised, but who makes the superstar plays when they need to be made? Referencing here Coleman's touchdown versus Clemson in overtime, and Versk and Fisk versus Louisville in the ACC championship. Really good question here. I like this one from him. So we kind of go offensively and defensively here. Mine, when looking at this question earlier today, just first person that stands out to me defensively is Azrae Thomas. I don't know about you guys, but I think a lot is going to be asked on him to get what needs to be done, and that's being good cornerback there in the red zone. But also, I've just really liked what you were telling us this spring, D-Lou, of him in camp really being assertive, kind of turn into a little bit of that leadership role, but also too, he looks really good out there. He looks really good and being on his own. And he's already made some splash plays throughout his career, just arriving in Tallahassee. But now a lot of things are on his shoulders this upcoming season under Adam Fuller's defense, second-year defensive backs coach Pat Surtain. I just really like what we've been hearing lately too from Mike Norvell as well about Azrae, saying that he has a chance to be one of the best, if not the best, college football cornerback. So to me, defensively, I'll start off. I really think Azrae Thomas, if we're looking for a big play here and you need a takeaway there, and let's say, someone's got a big drive here and they need a good takeaway, I'm going with Azrae Thomas there at the cornerback position, which I wouldn't really expect to go that route. I'd rather go in the trenches and such at the edge or defensive tackle position. But I just think I'm thinking very strongly about a big season from Azrae Thomas and new Loco Ocho.
I don't know if I agree.
All right, that's fine.
I don't know if I agree. He dropped a lot. He dropped a lot of potential interceptions during the spring. Now, if you need a pass deflection, I'm definitely going with AZ. But interception, I might go with someone else at this time. I'm sure he's really working on that, though, going into the preseason, taking advantage of those opportunities, because that was something that, obviously when the ball bounced off of his hand in those moments, I mean, all the coaches, even on the offensive side, were like, catch the ball. I mean, they want to see those plays be made. But another guy, if we're talking about Jared Verse and Braden Fisk going out there and dominating, I think you really have to look at Joshua Farmer, because he had some dominant moments last season, especially before, playing through that hand injury throughout the second half of the 2023 season before ultimately undergoing that surgery. I think he's due for a breakout year, and, we'll see right alongside him, Darrell Jackson, his longtime friend and running mate. Those guys could potentially be a force in the middle. And I think more of the worry is, the depth behind them and how they're going to fill in and grow throughout the season. And then outside at defensive end, I think I've got to go with Patrick Payton. I mean, we've seen that growth year over year. You saw the added 15 pounds and how he moved and played with it during spring practice. He's ready to kind of have that money year, similar to Jermaine Johnson when he came into Florida State, Jared Verse these last 2 years. Patrick Payton feels like it's his time. He's another guy that Norvell has really gushed about on the defensive side of the ball. And we actually even saw those two kind of have a exchange on social media earlier today, just talking about how basically thankful they were for one another. And, homegrown talent, this one's a little different since they recruited Peyton out of high school and have completely developed him here in Tallahassee. It feels like he could have a monster year.
Talked about the secondary, talked about the trenches, might as well go right in the middle and talk about DJ Lundy, a linebacker. We know Coach Filler likes to send his linebackers on blitzes. We saw it a lot with Kalen DeLoach last year. Mm-hmm. Really got Florida State to win at Clemson, was sending Kalen DeLoach on that blitz, got that scoop and score. I think Lundy is just a perfect fit in that role. It's just a big thumper of a linebacker, really not afraid to lay the hammer on people. He's really the most veteran guy in the defense in this system. He knows this defense. He knows Fuller. He knows what he wants. And I think that's going to be important for this defense going forward. There's a lot of question marks about that linebacker room, but I feel pretty comfortable about where Lundy is at this point.
Mm-hmm. Why are you not in there, D-Lo? Is that a no, or is this a thing about the comment?
Comment.
You're 30 likes away from Dustin being able to confidently say, "I pity the fool."
I agree with Austin. I think Lundy is going to end up leading Florida State in tackles this year, and really showing off some of those improvements that we've talked about this offseason.
Mm-hmm. And then I want to go offensively real quick as being you need a superstar play. You need a Keon Coleman play, Johnny Wilson, something crazy there. From what we've just seen in spring camp and just seeing what I saw just for a day and what he was trying to do too in the spring showcase and, just coming from a newcomer and making the plays he is, it's going to be Malik Benson. And it's going to be right now for me. And that's hard to kind of say a tad bit because, who's been one of the biggest playmakers for the last couple of years for Florida State is Lawrence Toafili. But I think I'll keep Lawrence Toafili in that basket there, but I'm adding in Malik Benson as one of those players that if a ball's going up there, he's going to do everything in his manpower to make that play for you. And, I think he's got a chip on his shoulder a ton. He's been doubted a ton as well, and he's ready to prove himself. And having one of those hungry guys there is so much fun to watch, and you can just rest easy at night knowing Malik Benson is probably going to win that one-on-one ball. He's going to do everything imaginable for it.
That's probably the easy one. And then the two names that come to mind to me, which you already said one, and Lawrence Toafili, who has consistently made plays for Florida State through the air and on the ground during his time in Tallahassee, and now seems to be potentially hitting an even higher level as he prepares for his final season with the Seminoles. Added on some good weight, some more muscle this offseason. I mean, just seems to be in a really good spot coming off that ACC championship performance last year. And then the other one for me, the newcomer, Jalen Lucas, who with his speed, was just all over the field throughout spring practice. And he's undersized. Florida State, they're going to have to be smart with how they utilize his ability to not get him left out there to dry too often. But when they are able to create those opportunities in the open space, this is a guy who can hit it, and he is gone. And it's not going to surprise me if we see a couple of those touchdowns this season where you're just like how did he get that angle there? He's just going to outrun the entire defense.
And it's funny because you saw him in the spring on the sideline to see him do it.
I was going to say Toafili. You already mentioned his versatility through the air, on the ground. We even saw it in the ACC championship as a wildcat option if they really need to go to it. He could do whatever it takes. He's made big play after big play throughout his career. And, as Los would say, Baby Naz, just a really good football player. He really is, and I think he's due for a big season.
Next question. This one will be quick. Who is FSU starting tackles in fall camp? This comes from Bob on Discord. So we were in the production meeting earlier just talking about this left tackle position. That seems to be more of, got some depth there. No one's really going to be taking the spot of Darius Washington, but you have some youngsters there's behind, and then also too, looking at Jeremiah Byers at the right tackle. Those two have solidified themselves as starters, and a lot of people talking about Darius Washington. This is a guy that this is his best position, so that's probably what you like to have him there the most at. Maybe too, from whenever he was plugged in, he had a lot of good reps there too. Whenever he had to get thrown in there too, I think the center position too does well with him just because of his knowledge of the line there, and his communication excels because of how much time he's gotten at all these positions. But from what we've seen consistency-wise, Darius Washington is a really solid player to have for DJ on his blind side.
Yeah, Darius to me is the best offensive lineman on the roster right now. I thought that was evident throughout 2023, especially like Logan mentioned with his versatility. He can basically move across that offensive line wherever they need him to. And he simply settled into that left tackle position because of the injury to Robert Scott. And when he did get those opportunities, he's just run away with the job at this point. So I think you're looking at a potential preseason All-American, in my opinion, but definitely someone that's going to be first team preseason All ACC and one of the top offensive linemen in the conference. He's just that good going into his 6th year at Florida State. And then Byers also, he was up and down a little bit last year, but I feel like he's taken some steps forward this offseason. Was pretty solid during the spring, and it's going to be hard for someone to beat him out of that job. We'll see what Robert Scott is able to do if he's healthy and, is able to come back and compete. He started his career at FSU on the right side of the line, then move to the left side of the line. So, I mean, depending what happens, he could maybe be a swing tackle for the season. And then you've also got Jalen Early and Lucas Simmons, some of those guys who have continued to grow, who are fighting for spots in the 2D. But I think the starting spot's relatively locked down, barring injury.
Agree. Robert Scott has the talent, but he's just been so banged up the last few years that we don't know what kind of player he is at this point. Byers is going to have to be better. You know, you mentioned he was up and down last year. He was really up and down in the run game last year. And as I said 10 minutes ago, I think this is going to be a run-heavy offense. He's going to have to get those blocking assignments down this year. Obviously, second year in a system, coming from a smaller school is, you know, it's a big change for offensive linemen, going from blocking in small school Texas to Florida State. That's a huge difference. Take some time to adjust, and you know, second year under Alex Atkins, I think he'll be able to get it done.
This next question is from Pandas Tab on Discord asking, surprise breakout players in fall camp here in a little over a month. A breakout player in fall camp. I've got one, and it's going to be Elijah Moore, the incoming true freshman wide receiver. I think he's just naturally, it's just going to break out. You know, it's easy to go the skill position here, but just from what we've seen, I just think I'm more of high interest just of the amount of ability that he brings to an offense. I think it's going to really work well with Mike Norvell. Not saying that he's going to be a breakout player this upcoming season for Florida State, but if we're talking fall camp here and someone that's going to catch some buzz, I'm going with Elijah Moore, true freshman wide receiver.
I think I've got to go with one of the young offensive linemen. You know, I mentioned Jalen Early and Lucas Simmons a moment ago, but one guy I forgot about was Andre Otto, who is another young guy who's got a lot of versatility, has bounced between playing tackle and center so far early in his career. And he's someone that I think could be a diamond in the rough for Florida State down the line. A very smart guy who turned down offers in the Ivy League to come work with Alex Atkins at Florida State. And, you know, I've been really impressed with some of those early signs. And it seems like the coaching staff, you know, they really like what they're seeing out of him so far. He's growing in the right direction. You know, not necessarily going to play a big role in 2024, but this is a guy who I think Florida State fans need to know moving forward for Florida State in that offensive line room.
To me, there always seems to be a running back that's under the radar that just everyone starts talking about. You know, for the last few years, it was CJ Campbell. Before that, it was Trayshawn Ward. Now I think it's Sam Singleton. I think Singleton's kind of flying under the radar a little bit. Got a lot of talent. That obviously that running back room is stacked, and everyone's going to be talking about the true freshman Cam Davis. But I like Sam Singleton a lot. He showed a lot of flashes in his moments last year. Showed some flashes in the spring. I think he's going to be a really good football player. Maybe even this year, even if he's not going to be relied upon that much. But I think he's a good football player.
It's a good pick. That was where I was leaning before I decided to go offensive line. And Singleton, someone, you know, you look at Florida State's running back room and you've got 3 seniors in it, and also Jalen Lucas coming in, who played a lot of football at Indiana. And I mean, Samuel Singleton was right there with those guys making plays throughout spring practice. So definitely someone with a bright future in Tallahassee.
Mm-hmm. I like those picks. Those are some good picks right there, gentlemen. Someone that
Thank you.
Just bring out. Yeah, that was good stuff. We had some good ones there. So, you know, like I always say before we get, you know, too deep in this, as always, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe. You know, if you have any questions too, or some topics thrown in the comments over to the side, but more likes, more subscribers helps us get our content out there more. And we want to get as much as we can before we get into the season, and we can jump into a lot of things, because last year it was about hour and a half, 2 hour kind of episodes. So try to keep us there, try to keep us going that route. So definitely appreciate it if you guys hit the like button on YouTube or Facebook if you're hanging out with us this evening. Next question is regarding the linebacker room. Who takes the second linebacker role? This is from Pittman on X. Who's going to jump in and take this second linebacker role? And Dustin's over here shaking his head like, who is it going to be? I mean, that's something that is probably one of the big question marks, just like on the thumbnail of this video. Who wants to take that role next to DJ Lundy? You got a handful of guys here, some youngsters in the room as well, like Omar Graham Jr. You got a Blake Nicholson too, who got some playing time this last season. You brought in some transfers too as well with Sean Murphy. from Alabama. You brought in Cam Riley from Auburn, big, massive sized linebacker, 240 pounds, just a massive size for a linebacker position. But who really wants to take that second role next to DJ Lundy? You were just so spoiled the last few seasons with Kalen DeLoach and what you had there too with Tatum Bethune. Who's going to be the combo piece to DJ Lundy? Who wants to hold hands with DJ Lundy? It's a big fall camp to figure that out.
It's a hard question to answer. I mean, there's so many guys. Obviously, Cam Riley coming in, but then you've really got Sean Murphy, Omar Graham Jr., Blake Nicholson, and Justin Cryer that could all be in contention for that position as well. So, I mean, really 5 guys potentially fighting for one starting spot next to DJ Lundy. I mean, regardless who gets the starting role, you're still going to see those guys sprinkled in throughout the rotation. But, you know, as we've seen with this linebacker unit the last couple of years, it seems like they really want to lean heavily on 2 guys and then kind of sprinkle a third into that rotation as well. You know, interested to see if maybe they open it up a little bit more in 2024. It's really tough for me. I think I would maybe lean Cam Riley just because of the experience. But at the same time, you know, with his size, and we talked about it before, like how is Florida State going to use him in this defense? You know, he's a bigger dude than they've had recently at linebacker with Kalen and Tatum, you know, both measuring under 6 foot at the NFL Combine. And now you've got a guy coming in who's at least 6'4", maybe the full 6'5" that he was listed at Auburn, and 240 pounds at least. So, I mean, maybe they trim him up some at that, you know, to lose some weight a little bit, but it's going to be something to watch. And that's probably one of the bigger question marks on defense as we get towards the preseason.
Yeah, arguably the biggest. I think it's going to be matchup dependent as far as who starts. I think you're going to see a lot of rotating in and out of the starting lineup game to game, depending on, you know, what kind of system they're playing. I do agree. I think I'd lean Cam Riley for right now, just given the size and experience. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Sean Murphy play against some of those faster teams that you'll play on the schedule.
This next question is coming from Eric on X, asking, how will we deal with lack of leadership caused by leaders leaving the team last year, getting drafted? And I think this is a really good question to me, because I think I brought it up on here a few times, just off of the, you know, from Eric saying it straight up. You had a lot of guys that were leading this team the last couple of seasons. You know, look at Jordan Travis. I mean, how big of a presence he was and how he grew into becoming a big leader. And then also, too, just the immediate transfers like Jared Verse, who came in and started right away and built that kind of respect among his teammates, and then built into a big-time leader this last season. 2, Fabian Lovett. A lot of guys that were on this team, like Brian Jones, Renardo Green, these guys have been around this program for a long while. And now you're relying on some other guys. Yes, you have some experienced ones, but it's not like the last year's team, in my opinion. And I think that's going to be something that we're going to kind of get a sense of that early on in this season. And it's going to be fixed a little bit. And there's going to have to be some guys that maybe weren't so verbal and talkative as much. There's going to be some guys that have to step up and take those roles, like a Shaheem Brown, which we've seen, yes, but these guys will have to step in and take a leadership role in order for things to improve. And I'm sure Mike Norvell is looking for some guys to take on some roles from, just like Eric said, a handful that you had in the last couple of years that really led your team from the player side. And as we all know, as many coaches say, having that is so strong and excelling with the team and going forward and having accountability from one another. And that's, I think, this team might be lacking a tiny bit going into 2024.
Yeah, that's the scary thing. I mean, there are just so many guys gone that have been leaders for Florida State over the years. And I think first off, you have to lean on the leaders that you do still have. You know, the guys like Lawrence Toafili, and then you get to that offensive line room, you know, Darius Washington, Maurice Smith, even though he hasn't been on the field necessarily lately a ton. Robert Scott, I mean, has continued to do his part in the locker room. And, you know, on the defensive side of the ball, you still got some veterans. You know, you think about Fentrell Cypress, AZ's played a big role during his first couple of years at Florida State. I know DJ Lundy almost transferred to Colorado, but he's done a very good job of being a leader throughout this offseason. And with that, it just goes that there are some guys who have been here. They were able to learn from Jordan Travis and Trey Benson and Johnny Wilson and Jared Verse and Fabian Lovett, Braden Fisk, and the linebacker, all those guys. They're able to learn from them, and they've got to hold on to that rope. Then the first two guys that come to mind to me, Patrick Payton and Joshua Farmer, and with that, Daryl Jackson as well. I don't think you necessarily saw that level of leadership you needed from Jackson and Farmer at all the time during spring practice. That's hopefully something that they'll continue to improve on as they're new in those roles. And then you go to the defensive backfield. Obviously, I mentioned AZ, but continuing to be a bigger leader, and then and Shaheem as well. I mean, there's potential for guys to step into these roles, but at the end of the day, they have to do it. And we heard Jordan Travis talk about it. It's not easy to be a leader, but when you're at that position, you have to step into it and embrace it. And he was ultimately able to do that. Hopefully some of these younger Seminoles will be able to do that as well.
Well, it's college sports, so leadership starts at the top with coaching. And Norvell and his coaching staff are as good of leaders as we've had at Florida State in a while. Then from there, yeah, obviously you're losing your big leaders from last season at pretty much every position. But that's what college sports is. Every 3 to 4 years, guys rotate in, guys rotate out, go pro, go into other fields, whatever. That's what we love about college athletics, and that's just part of the natural cycle. So, yeah, you're going to see some of those players that Dustin mentioned step up. Shaheem Brown, Pat Payton, Darius Washington, Toafili, those guys. At the same time, it really does start at the top of Norvell, and I trust them to get these guys motivated and to do whatever it takes to win games.
Yeah, we've seen it, where a team the previous year has a ton of success, and then we see sort of a fall off the next season, and you kind of lose some of, obviously you lost a lot of leadership just from the veteran experience, but, just guys thinking not on the same lines as you had the last season. So I think this is a good test to see if Mike Norvell can take this into becoming a program that can go year to year to year to year, where you're not worried about that, like what you had under Nick Saban at Alabama, where you're able to make these, these kind of things are just thrown out the window. You already know what team you're going to have on the leadership side and accountability and all that kind of stuff. And those are the three, Dustin, that I was going to point to, maybe more specifically two in the trenches with Daryl Jackson and Joshua Farmer. Those guys have to jump into a bigger leadership role, in my opinion, for that side of the ball to be successful, but overall more of a presence on the team. And they really need that. So, having to be accountable and, just I don't know. That's just something I'm, monitoring going into this upcoming season. So we'll see what ends up happening. Because the talent's there. But this team is really going to be relying on those two guys and stay healthy throughout the whole season as well. But there's a lot on their shoulders, and I'm just interested to see how they take that on this upcoming year. Next question here is coming from Dylan, asking, how different does this offense look compared to last year, and how deep in the playbook can we go with DJU at QB1? How deep can we go there? And one thing that just stands out to me with the latter half of that question is, how far can you go? DJ's been in college for a very long time now. I think that's something Mike Norvell would immediately answer. This guy has a lot of knowledge, and I think there is some big time pros in that, and what Mike Norvell, Tony Tokars, and Alex Atkins, what they can try to build offensively there. Some things are going to be switched up, and things are going to look a little bit different here and there. But with a guy with this experience, being a veteran in that college football level, you can reach pretty far with this guy, which is going to be good. It's just, how can that also work along the lines with, this upcoming year's team with the offense? How does this string go with my wide receiver room, and how can it work with this newly established kind of running back room with Lawrence Toafili and Rodell Williams and a handful of others? How far can you build that offense with DJ? I think to me, you can go pretty far with his experience, in my opinion.
Yeah, the more I think about it, I think at this time, just with the way we've seen these wide receivers perform and the lack of maybe necessarily a true receiving threat in the tight end room, I mean, you're really going to have to lean on that running game, especially early in the season, because, building chemistry in practice is one thing, but once these guys get into the actual fire out there in Ireland against Georgia Tech, how they perform is going to be another thing. And, you hope that this passing game continues to blossom throughout the season. I do think, we're going to see those deep shots that we talked about during the spring. I mean, Florida State definitely wants to try and hit on those highlight plays because that's just going to open it up even more for this array of running backs that they use to, really just make defenses lose their confidence. I mean, they can kind of go at you any which way from that backfield. Obviously, DJ is going to be a little bit, a lot less mobile necessarily than Jordan Travis was with that size differential, going from 6'1", 205, 210 pounds to 6'5", 240, 250 pounds. DJ's a bigger dude. I think you're going to see, as far as his legs, utilizing those short yardage scenarios to try and get first downs, but maybe not necessarily as much mobility overall at the quarterback position as we saw with Jordan Travis.
Yeah, Jordan Travis is a true one-of-one. I mean, there's quite literally no other player like him in college football, and you have to design a playbook for Jordan Travis because of that skill set. You're gonna have to do the same thing with DJU, and that's what Norvell's really good at, is molding those playbooks to fit his players and his quarterbacks especially. So as far as, how's the offense going to look with DJ? We don't know what the offense is going to look like with DJ because it's going to be something Norvell hasn't run before, and I think that's going to be something unique.
Mm-hmm. This next question is from Panda's Tab on Discord. It'll be our last two questions here for tonight. First one is, which freshman will have the biggest role this upcoming, season, but, still predicated on fall camp here. But who's going to be a freshman that they're going to jump in there in fall camp and expect a little bit from before the season begins? Who are we thinking here?
I think the obvious one, and we've already talked about on this show, Landon Thomas. I mean, that's probably the clearest path to playing time if you're a true freshman on the entire roster, just because there's not really any established depth there. I mean, really, to climb up that ladder, you've got to beat out Jarrell Powers and Brian Courtney, who haven't played much significant time during their careers at Florida State, and then Jackson West, who doesn't have a catch at the college level yet, and also Kyle Morlock, who was the lowest graded blocker on Florida State's team last season. So, I mean, really, that position room is wide open for the taking. And you look at Thomas, he's already 6'4", 240 pounds, and he had some good moments as a blocker throughout spring practice. Obviously something that he's going to have to continue to improve on, especially when he gets out there in true game action. But he's someone that had a steady career over in South Georgia, and he's got that receiving threat ability, definitely some athleticism. Didn't get to see it a whole ton in the spring showcase, and I think he's more of the future of the room than the present, but he's probably the true freshman with the clearest path to getting on the field.
I would agree with that. Is there a sneaky Mekhi Danzy return possibility? That's the only other one I could think of as a true freshman getting on the field and making an impact right away. It's just find a way to utilize his speed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm thinking something like that. Obviously Mekhi Danzy nearly Olympic level speed, especially with what he was able to do during his junior season in high school before a leg injury prematurely ended this last one. But he's starting to get back fully healthy. That's a potential one. And the only other one that really wouldn't necessarily make sense to me, maybe at that slot wide receiver position, LaWayne McCoy gets sprinkled in there a little bit with Destin Hill and Vandravius Jacobs gone. So, I mean, right there behind Ja'Kai Douglas, obviously, who I'm projecting to be the starting slot at this time. But, he was another guy. I mean, he showed up during spring practice, had some very good days down the stretch of spring, and someone that Mike Norvell noted a couple times. A lot of potential there. And back when he committed, I remember, we pulled up some of those highlight tapes. I mean, he can make some freaky plays at times, and definitely an athlete who could get out there and make some splashes for FSU, because they're potentially going to need that with, how we've talked about this wide receiver room so far.
Mm-hmm. This kind of ties into what we were talking about there with Mekhi Danzy. Another question from Panda's Tab on Discord asking who is returning kicks and punts and fall camp, and just thinking about speed and craziness there with Jalen Lucas, and you match that there with Mekhi Danzy at kickoff return. And then also too, looking at punt return with Jalen Lucas, you've seen more of him, Dustin, more in live action a little bit, but just how crazy shifty he can be. And talking with David Johnson, Florida State's running backs coach, after a practice before the spring showcase, he was just saying, this guy is a different kind of athlete, just a mix of just natural awareness and vision wise. And I think that should be really intriguing for FSU fans because you've had speed before, really, but it's really more of a threat when you've got guys that can match it with vision. And I think of RG3 back when he was with Washington, or Baylor, he has a crazy speed. He's a beeline down straight speed kind of guy, but he wasn't really going to make you miss as much. But he would use his speed, if he's got you already cooking. But this guy can be so shifty just because of how small he is and his size. But you've also got some guys like Deuce Spann who you've thrown back there, and you've had some big time moments, but it's more been about inconsistency there, and there's speed that you can utilize. Just I think vision, and when we know Mike Norvell, he's not scared to put out his star wide receiver 1 at punt return either if he thinks that's going to help. And sure enough, Keon Coleman put Florida State's offense in some really good positions on the field this last season. So this is why it's going to be pretty intriguing to watch this fall camp, D-Lou, when we're watching, these kickoff return reps and punts.
You kind of went over it. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to shake out at this moment, but I would imagine that they didn't land an All-American kick returner from Indiana and Jalen Lucas not to utilize him at kick return. And then, like you said, Deuce Spann, he's returned for a touchdown before and a big moment for Florida State. So, those are maybe the two favorites. And I think you nailed the punt return selection. Florida State's shown they're not afraid to have a guy who just came into the program, who's never returned punts before at the college level, get back there and rely on him to make a big play. Because we saw it with Keon last season when they could have, maybe went with someone like Lawrence Toafili, who probably would have been, I don't know, a little bit maybe more consistent at the position as far as catching the ball and everything. Not like Keon dropped any, but just in a hypothetical discussion, if you're thinking between those two. And like we saw during spring, like Lawrence Toafili is back there some. And I think he's someone you can rely on who isn't going to drop the punt if it comes his way. But maybe if you're punting to someone like Malik Benson, maybe there's a chance the ball bounces off his hands a little bit more. But at the same time, if he gets his hands on it, he's got a higher chance of making a big play for you. So that's kind of the pros and cons I think you've got to weigh on special teams at this time. And even last year, though, like Keon, he did really well with it. So, it just comes down to the player ultimately.
The only other name I would throw out, and maybe I'm misremembering, but Shakai Douglas had some reps at punt return last year. And obviously Jalen Lucas's brother is, basically bred for that position. That's what he does well, is being a returner. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Douglas back there on occasion as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just thinking about too, just this offense this year and what you have at your caliber at quarterback with DJ. And if you get someone just to give you some good yards a little bit, and let's just say you're nearing the half and you just got a few plays and such, you've got a guy with DJ who has a big arm, just, there's just things that you can switch up there, just depending if you have a good reliability on your punt returner who can give you some yards, like with what you have with Keon Coleman. And Jordan Travis isn't known for getting the ball down there so far. He did, yes, but you just have a different arm at your arsenal now. And I think, just looking deeper into this, just what they want to do and who they're going to put back there. It's going to be intriguing to watch this fall camp. That's going to wrap up the fall camp Q&A here that we had. Thank everybody for throwing us a ton of questions. Got a lot more than I had expected, but we're going to do a lot more of these. We'll probably do one last Q&A before the season officially begins. So we'll put that out on our Twitter and ask for some questions across the board on our social medias. But I appreciate all of everyone reaching out and giving us some questions and topics to go over. Deeply appreciated. We're not done yet, though. We're going to jump into some quick stuff here from basketball, get Austin VZ and the basketball latest on that side.
Yeah, real quick, just want to congratulate Sam Cassell for winning his first reign as a coach in the NBA. He won 3 as a player, 2 at the Rockets, 1 with the 08 Celtics. But he was a member of the Celtics coaching staff this year as his first year at the Celtics and gets his first reign as a coach. So congratulations to him. His name has been thrown out for a few head coaching jobs, but I think he's most likely just end back up in Boston. But correct me if I'm wrong on that, D'Lo.
I hope so. I think really, like you said, the head coaching jobs are kind of growing slim at the moment across the NBA. Seems like maybe the only other option would be for him to potentially rejoin Doc Rivers and Milwaukee, but with the Bucks hiring Darvin Ham, would that
Yeah.
move make sense at this time? It seems like he probably is going to play an even bigger role on Joe Mazzulla's staff with Charles Lee taking the Charlotte job. So I think it just makes sense for both parties to keep him in Boston. But what's crazy about this is, the Celtics' last two championships, 2008 and 2024, the 2008 Celtics were able to acquire Sam Cassell before the season. And in his first year, he wins a ring with the team. And then he comes back. And like you said, his first season as a coach with the Celtics, they win another ring. So in my opinion, just keep that big bald legend around.
Well, what I didn't know is when I was doing just some quick research for the article, Paul Pierce said that him, Kevin Garnett, and Cassell were the real big three of that team and not Ray Allen, which I thought pretty funny because obviously they had their whole beef with Ray Allen. And, Cassell was like an 8th or 9th man on that team, kind of came off the bench and was like the veteran leader on that team. But it was just funny to see Paul Pierce say that about Sam Cassell, who is a former All-Star in his own right in 2004. And like I said, a multi-time champion, but pretty funny quote from the truth there.
Shout out to Sam Cassell.
Shout out Sam Cassell, all-time Florida State legend, part of the great teams in 93 with Charlie Ward and Bob Sura. Just really good Florida State Seminole, represents Florida State really well. Now, I've told this story before, pretty sure on here, where I was in Vegas for the Summer League wearing a Florida State polo, and he walked by me and pat me on the chest and goes, "Nice polo," and just keeps on walking. I'm like, oh my God, that was Sam Cassell. But he loves Florida State. I know everyone wants him to be the next coach. I don't think it's going to happen, but he really does love him some Florida State.
I wonder how much he truly loves them, though, because when I was at the game in February, I was trying to get autographs, and I was literally yelling at Sam Cassell. I was like, "Hey, Sam Cassell, Florida State." And it wasn't like a lot of people were trying to get Sam Cassell's autograph. I'm sitting there trying to hand him my hat and my pen. I'm like, "Florida State." And he just looked at me, smiled, just walked back in the tunnel. So
well,
maybe it was me. Maybe it was me.
Thought you were some fangirl and just get away from me.
I am. I'm trying to get
please.
Who's trying to get a Sam Cassell autograph in 2024? Come on.
That's probably why he looked at you weird. He's like, "Who is this guy?"
Sign it though. I'm yelling Florida State at you. Most of these people in Boston have no idea what's going on. Hook me up.
I mean, he did what you needed to do. That should have caught his attention, but maybe he's just not like VZ's saying he loves Florida State, really.
But I'm glad he's
all the way up there.
He's
still on your staff.
Yeah. The only other notable news for now is Florida State is planning to hire East Carolina's Jake Morton to replace Steve Smith on the coaching staff. We talked about last week how Steve Smith was leaving for Boston College. Morton played for Leonard Hamilton at Miami in the early 90s. He's kind of bounced all over the place in his coaching career. He's at East Carolina now. He's at Western Kentucky before that. He's at Coppin State, which is a really small Division I school in Baltimore. He was an assistant at Miami for a little bit. Kind of just been all over the place. Hasn't really been a part of any great teams. Florida State hasn't made it official yet, but per John Rothstein, that's the expectation for the final coaching spot.
Yeah, my only comments on this is that based on my research, he looks older than Leonard Hamilton, and he actually played for Leonard Hamilton over 25 years ago. So that blew my mind.
A lot of things blow your mind, D-Lo. A lot of things do.
Oh, well.
You're a champion, though. You can champion. That's one thing that you can say, though. You are a Boston Celtics fan champion.
Yep, getting the tattoo done a couple weeks.
No, you're not. No, you're not.
Yeah, right on my forehead.
Yeah, I was about to say, where is Mama Lewis at in the chat? Because I already wasn't a fan of you getting that mohawk earlier, but
yeah, she wasn't happy about potential mohawk.
Yeah, I'm surprised you haven't already gotten a text from that. But a tattoo, you would have that phone ringing, or it might happen here once we wrap up the show. But that's going to do it for this week's episode on Hear the Spear. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us. We're getting closer. We got some preview articles coming on NoleGameday.com, getting you ready for fall camp, battles to watch, and then also to position by position, giving you the rundown just like we did during the spring. So get ready for content there. Stay subscribed here on YouTube. If you're still hanging out with us on YouTube right now, we definitely appreciate it. Smack that like button. got a lot of cool ideas in mind for the shows this upcoming year as well to benefit you guys coming and hanging out with us every evening. So make sure you subscribe. We're live every Wednesday usually. Now that the Celtics and the Mavericks season is done, we're back now, solidified. Probably Wednesdays, unless something else breaks. If something big breaks, we'll go earlier in the week.
You're
Dustin's
really trying to
nodding
get to this hour 20 mark, huh?
Just hit the bell. I'll say it. Just hit the bell,
Holy
get notified
crap.
when we go live. It's the easiest way to do it.
No, just make sure you hit that bell. That's the most important thing to do. But we're about 8 seconds away from 1 hour
Just
and 20 minutes. But thanks,
fill in the
guys.
dead
Dustin,
space.
you say your last words since you're a champion. Say your last words.
Let's do it again.
I'm really
There it
upset.
is.
Al Horford's a champion. I needed to say it. I'm really upset.
My
I wanted him
favorite
to retire
Florida
ringless.
Gator. My favorite Florida Gator. Should I do the chop real quick?
Oh God, no!
Whoa. Okay.
Oh
In
my
the stream.
God,
Bye-bye.
no!